I would prefer not to.
It's after 20 minutes,
No, it doesn't bother me. If it doesn't bother you.
Yes, so this
Yeah.
Jim is a regular employee.
Yeah, he does the AV stuff.
Oh, yeah. So, yes.
And there's the string annual one.
Ah. Well. Well, the thing's probably on already.
Should we wait?
Well, that mic is so sensitive.
Watch what we say.
Hmm?
We shall watch what we say.
or pantomime.
Right, that's it.
No private conversations here. I finally realized what was happening to me today, about a half hour ago. My allergy, my seasonal allergy started today. I was sitting there saying my eyes are itchy, my nose kept dry, and I thought it took me all day
Well,
to
those
put it
things are
together.
blowing, those from the dandelions and stuff, so.
Yeah.
Grass and the trees
Yeah,
that are
right.
ruined and, yeah.
Right.
So
I'm not lucky
When the
that
rain
it
comes
started
down.
only now.
Well, I just read on the internet, which is always right,
yes,
Absolutely.
that people who have allergies have less chance of getting COVID.
oh,
Good news.
good news.
I told that to my daughter, and she said, baloney, basically.
Here,
Fair warning, ladies, the stream is actually live right now, so if you have anything unsavory to say about your friends and neighbors, say now, or forever hold your peace.
We just said that
Okay.
we'll stop talking about it.
thank you. Yeah, I understand that things are a little rough because some of the staff have COVID.
Oh, really?
I don't know if it's staff or just the participants. That's what he said in the morning.
Oh, he did?
He
I
said
missed
that,
this
he
morning.
said that there will be no drinks and coffee because some were taken here with COVID. But I wasn't sure if it's staff or
Staff.
or.
Oh,
Oh, I thought he meant this morning.
That's what he said in the morning, yeah.
I had another appointment this morning and I missed it. Why would drinks, how would you get COVID from drinks? Everybody has their own cup.
I've been wondering why we all have to have separate stuff.
Well,
Well, they didn't have the coffee pot set up this morning. So
Yeah.
that's why people. needed to
oh,
go
it's
to
that one, it's not that one that you just put a cup, oh, of course you press something.
Yeah, it was because they're low on staff and they didn't have the coffee set up here.
Oh, I thought it was because you catch something from the.
That's what I saw.
What do I?
Hello?
Oh,
Aaron Giftsmith. Yeah, you know, I thought I'll bring a bottle of wine. I said, no, they'll. So you're saying he said like
Thank you
this
so
morning?
much.
He said this morning that the coffees or the drinks are not available because people can, have you been here today?
Yeah,
So.
Good evening,
Good
hi.
evening. Well, we can ask the rabbi.
What's that?
There was a discussion, I wasn't coffee served in the morning, and I decided that what I heard through the Zoom is because people got COVID.
Yeah, that's right. So we're short-staffed.
yeah.
Okay.
So if you want coffee, you have to go down to the cafe.
My machine that I asked you to buy me.
Oh,
Remember?
no.
When that machine first came, I fell in love with Cafe Vanilla or something.
Uh-huh.
And I'm so in love with it. I have a Tanakh,
A little one,
and,
a little one.
and I found out it was only $3,000, so it would be $1 a person.
Why do you say $1 a person?
I'm sure we have 3,000 people.
Oh, I see what you
tonight
mean.
Getting the machine, right?
And your point being?
You never did it. I never got the machine.
Okay.
I have the Tanakh on my phone.
I think they're adjusting the camera so people who are live streaming can see. Let's wait a few minutes. How was poetry yesterday? Or Thursday? Yeah.
Interesting,
I'm sorry?
interesting,
Yeah. Interesting poems.
interesting.
The Hopkins poem is very rich, isn't
I
it?
loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, no, he's great.
So I have two questions. A, what time are we finishing tonight?
9 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I told my husband, I'll be home latest at 9
You're
o'clock,
eating
so I'm
and everything.
Okay. And it goes without saying, as it always does, that if you need to leave early, you do.
Another question.
Yes.
For all the time that I'm not asking questions, this is the time.
Yeah.
Are we poetry taking also a summer vacation?
No.
Okay.
I will be gone. We may be missing a week here and there, but we're not going to take a summer vacation, no. I think people really want to do it. And we're going to do Joyce's Ulysses.
Yes, I know.
You know that?
No, I don't know, but I assume.
Yeah. You know
At the
it?
same time.
Thursday the 16th at the same time. Have you read it?
Until I got tired, I very tried it 3 times, and I got stuck at various places.
Oh, for sure. Well, the Sirens part where that's the night town orgy, 150 pages, oh my. But we're talking about Joyce's Ulysses. And there is a Bloomsday Day, you know about that, yeah. So at Poetry, we're going to be reading excerpts.
When is it?
June 16th.
Oh, it's
Which-
always the same, I know, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
It's always the same day, but Bloomsday happens to be on a Thursday. Otherwise, I don't know if we'd have done it, maybe. Yes,
Another question.
yes.
Do you have already the topic for next year's Torah studies?
No, but I'm thinking about it. You have some suggestions?
Yes, not to do philosophy.
You're not interested in wisdom?
I'm not that kind of wisdom.
Seriously.
I'm down to earth. I'm not.
You haven't enjoyed it this year very much? No. I think you've said that to me before.
Because of Rabbi Akiva or whatever it was, I could tell you no
Yeah.
nonsense.
One of the things I'm thinking about is just going back to Torah portion of the week. We haven't done that for a while. And
My suggestion was to take the big poets, the 12 poets, and to
the
take
12 prophets.
Prophets.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
poets, the 12
The-
prophets, poets, and to give a little introduction to each poet, prophet,
prophet.
and read selected passages from each of them.
Right. I've always avoided prophets because I think it's the stories that we like. The stories are rich and multifaceted. The prophets proclaim. There's, of course, some interesting stuff there, but I don't know that it makes for as rich a conversation as the stories. Yeah, that's why I've not done it.
I'm going to prepare something.
Okay, very good.
What about women in the Bible?
We've done that. We did that. Not that we can't do it again. We did it 4 or 5 years ago. And there are some amazing
I've
women.
decided My Ulysses story. I'm an English teacher, was an English teacher by training.
Yes?
And when my daughter was in high school, she took honors English. She was reading Ulysses, and she said to me, "It's so hard." I said, "I'll read it, and we'll read it together."
Yeah, good. It takes work. I've done it, I've gone through it twice with a teacher and a small group. You have to do it that way, somebody who knows. You guys know Jackie?
Hi.
I'm not sure everybody knows everybody, so why don't we do that?
Jean Garfield. Carol Marshall. Candy Anchor.
Ellen Markell.
Maya Hartzmark.
And Jackie Lowy.
Okay, so, Jackie, there's a sheet, and I think everybody has one, and if people come in, the ground rules are, there's cake over there. Feel free to get up and take a piece of cake anytime you want to. The coffee machine, as I've said, is not plugged in here, so if you want coffee, go to the cafe, and there's no charge for it. So, what I want to do tonight together is to look at some stories that feature prominent individuals and look at biblical ethics from a particular point of view. So what I've done here is I've brought excerpts from 3 different sources. On page 1 and 2, we have an excerpt from John Barton's, you see it on page 2, Old Testament Ethics. And then also on page 2, the next by Aviva Zornberg, an essay on love, holiness, and the other, which continues to page 3. And then a passage from a very, very powerful but complex article by Aharon Lichtenstein, who's a very famous scholar. And his essay, Does Jewish Tradition Recognize an Ethic Independent of Halakha? I'll tell you a quick little anecdote, personal anecdote. I was on at a rabbinic conference, something like 2011 in Jerusalem, and we went to, I can't remember the name of the community, and we got in there and somebody was telling us about the community. And then at the end, he said, I now want to introduce you to Rabbi Aharon Lichtenstein. I thought, well, I've known about him for years. Hi, Patty. And here comes this little old guy up there and starts talking in the softest voice. I'm thinking to myself, that's Aharon Lichtenstein? And I went up to him afterwards and I told him how much I love his writing and so on. He subsequently died, but that was a very memorable moment for me. So, what I'd like to do is, is read through these pages, maybe not all of them, and then I want to turn to 3 biblical figures, Joseph, David, and Ruth, look at excerpts, and think about biblical ethics from the point of view that these sources indicate. So let me just start reading, and we can talk about these things. Old Testament, and Barton is a Christian scholar, so he uses Old Testament. There's no problem there, but that's why it is. The Old Testament moral vision is thus more complicated than it might appear. Certainly more complicated than most people think it is. Basic to it, I've argued with Otto, is a certain concept of human dignity. I'm sorry, this is a little philosophy. Maya doesn't like when I do philosophy. She's a sort of anti-wisdom, I think is the best way of putting it. In which the choices human beings make really matter. They, human beings, are not God's puppets in the theater, whose audience is other divine beings with their own concerns, to which humans are irrelevant. He's pointing to certain mythologies where the gods are fighting among themselves and they're interested in their drama. They, human beings, are instead partners with the single God in the only drama God is interested in. The drama played on earth by created beings. This is quite interesting. One God, not struggling with other gods. God's biography, so to speak, is not interesting to the biblical author, nor to God. God is interested in what's going on with human beings on earth. This concept gives the human race both a greater glory and a greater responsibility than it usually had in the cultures that surrounded Israel. It's not subject to random divine acts, and hence need not live fatalistically. On the other hand, humanity, is accountable for its own sins, which cannot be laid at the door of some malevolent divine power. Hence, both the hope and the fear we encounter in the prophets. Hope, because good moral choices are worth making. They are not nullified by an indifferent universe containing malign powers who snuff us out at will. But also fear, because wrong choices ensure bad consequences and the anger of a God who cannot be bought off. But alongside its high moral tone, the Old Testament is also aware of the ways in which even good human actions can go sour, as reflected in the realism of its classic narrative texts. These texts achieve a certain tour de force, combining a belief in God's moral government of the world and the importance of good human judgment with Ecclesiastes' awareness that time and chance happen to all. Both Judaism and Christianity have inherited that combination, and neither finds it easy to live with. I think that's a very rich paragraph, actually. Three forces and factors: God's moral government of the universe, human free will and therefore importance, and time and chance, that not everything is predictable. One of the commonplaces of biblical study is that the Old Testament lacks anything that could be called moral philosophy. And if by moral philosophy we mean the kind of theoretical discussion of ethics to be found in, say, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics or the dialogues of Plato, then the point is obviously correct. The Bible is not a philosophical text. It doesn't deal systematically with certain issues. So to that degree, if your model is Aristotle or Plato or Kant or the great moral philosophers, it's true. The Bible is not that kind of text. There can, however, be what may be called philosophical narratives. Narratives, that is, which are a means of handling moral themes. Martha Nussbaum has shown that the novels of Henry James fall into this category, and earlier critics had said the same of Jane Austen. A more obvious example would be Voltaire's Candide. In these very diverse cases, the object is not only to entertain, though it is that, but to engage the reader in the narrative in such a way that moral or philosophical issues, which might otherwise remain abstract or unfocused, present themselves much more sharply and call forth a response. My suggestion is that the Old Testament stories I've been discussing fall into a similar category. Certainly, they were told as entertainment. They are full of subtly developed characters, interesting incident, well-shaped plots. Certainly also some may contain historical recollection. I do not suppose that the story of David is composed out of the whole cloths and so on. Here I disagree with Barton, that the incidents it relates are rooted in actual events of the early monarchic period. But the author's purpose in each case is to explore human moral choices and thus to illuminate the moral life of his or her readers. If we want to name a genre to which the stories of Joseph and David belong, Voltaire's expression has much to commend it. Not exactly a philosophical tale, but a story with a serious purpose. So much for the major contribution of narrative text to our theme of moral vision. They embody and commend a range of virtues and good actions which must have been a part of the culture from which the texts come, even though they find little echo in legal or sapiential teaching. Sapiential meaning wisdom texts. So what Barton is saying here is that we might think that the moral content of the Bible is in the thou shalt do this and thou shalt not do that. What he's suggesting is the moral domain of the biblical text is not limited to do's and don'ts, but stories in which certain moral values are brought forward for our consideration. So, he goes on, the narratives exemplify what Otto describes as ethos rather than simply ethic, a distinction that we might convey in English by saying that they breathe a particular moral atmosphere rather than merely laying down the law. We have concentrated on particular points within certain biblical narratives, though in discussing the Joseph story and so on. Let's just look a little bit at the Zornberg piece. The philosopher Lon Fuller coined the expression, the morality of aspiration. In so doing, he sought to emphasize a distinction between the morality of duty and the morality of aspiration. The latter, he says, is the morality of the good life, of excellence, of the fullest realization of human powers. Fuller finds his clearest examples in Greek philosophy. For Plato and Aristotle, shortcoming, not wrongdoing, would characterize the failure of a human being to function at his best. However, in Fuller's view, the morality of the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments is expressed in terms of thou shalt not, and less frequently of thou shalt. It does not condemn men for failing to embrace opportunities for the fullest realization of their powers. Instead, it condemns them for failing to respect the basic requirements, laws of social living. So, what she is saying here is that Fuller thinks the morality of aspiration we find in the great philosophers, striving for excellence. What we find in the Bible is a morality of duty. So she's suggesting that Fuller suggests that biblical ethics are relegated to law and not moral aspiration. In his magisterial discussion of the aspirational requirements of Judaism, Aharon Lichtenstein mentions Lon Fuller, and with a fine sense of paradox declares, the Jew is also commanded to aspire. So what Lichtenstein is saying is that a morality of aspiration is also contained in the Bible, and we see that in the stories and not in the laws, and that, this is the paradox, we are commanded to aspire, not just that it's a good thing. So that here, Lichtenstein is bringing together commandment and aspiration. We have a duty, for example, to be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. This is not suggested as something you might want to think about, but we're commanded to do so. Okay? So what Zornberg is opening up here is that this whole issue of morality in the Bible is contained both in duties and in the command to be a better example of myself, which might mean character development, the development of a certain ethos, a way of living which can't be represented in do's and don'ts, but is part of the narrative quality of human existence. In his magisterial study, so he says, commanded to aspire. Even though aspiration takes one beyond the bounds of the legal requirement, law, which goes now by the Hebrew phrase lifnim meshurat hadin, the extra legal, that which is not contained in the law, is itself commanded. And this idea of lifnim meshurat hadin is very, very crucial. The intentionality of the law, or something beyond law. The classic texts for such commandments, however, are to be found in the Talmud and the Midrash and their commentaries. Here I think she goes wrong. As well as in the classic Jewish commentaries on the Torah. In other words, these elements of aspiration are located in the larger world of Torah literature, where biblical texts are interpreted as invoking a morality of aspiration. Page 3. Ramban, this is Nachmanides, a younger contemporary of Maimonides. Maimonides dies in 12,004. Ramban, Nachmanides, is born in 1194. So he is 10 when Maimonides dies, and an extraordinarily interested figure. Ramban is to be distinguished from Rambam. Some of us know this. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, Ramban. And since the M and the N sound alike, we pronounce them differently. We say Rambam, but we say Ramban. So we emphasize a different syllable so that we're not dependent on hearing very clearly whether that was an M or an N. Ramban, for example, classically describes holiness as the aspiration to go beyond the letter of the law. In the end, the sinews of the law do not provide sufficient nurture for the spiritual life. One may be a sensualist without stepping outside the law. In other words, you can be absolutely meticulous in keeping the law, but still be not a very good person. So there must be another way of getting to goodness than merely law. That's, I think, the claim here. A gray area that is not forbidden makes space for personal fastidiousness. To navigate this area, one needs the aspiration of an idea like that of holiness. This area is illuminated by the notion of imitatio Dei, imitating God. Be holy, for I, God, am holy. And if you think of a continuum from me to God, it's a continuum from me to infinity. So that the ladder climbing toward God's holiness is infinite, and one can never fully arrive, though one can climb the ladder. This is an elitist ethic which is not yet wholly voluntary. Elitist in the sense that I might think that I'm a good person if I follow the laws. If I want to dig deeper, if I want to know the interstices within the laws, if I want to aspire, then I'm on a different path or a complementary path. But one could say, if I follow the law, honor your father and mother, don't murder, don't steal, keep the Sabbath, and so on, that makes you a good person. If you want to be an extraordinary person, this now is a consequence of aspiration. It is striking that Ramban identifies the source of the aspirational arc precisely within the Old Testament. To read these as requiring only minimal fulfillment of the morality of duty would fail to do justice to the richer implications of expressions like, be holy for I, God, am holy. And Ramban also quotes another passage from Deuteronomy, that God wants us to pursue the right and the good, which also is aspirational. The Torah itself contains imperatives of both duty and aspiration. Often indeed, to quote Fuller himself, there's an invisible pointer that marks the dividing line where the pressure of duty leaves off and the challenge of excellence begins. Okay, so let's not read the Liechtenstein piece and get right to some texts. So let's look at the Joseph story. So what I want to do is set up the challenge that confronts Joseph later in the story and ask, how does he act and what is his motivation? Okay? So, chapter 37. This is the situation. So what I want to do is I want to read the first 11 verses, and then I want to ask, what has gone wrong here? How would we describe what has become problematic? What has led to the problem? Now Jacob was settled in the land where his father had sojourned, the land of Canaan. This then is a line of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended the flocks with his brothers as a helper to the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. And Joseph brought bad reports of them to their father. Now Israel, that's Jacob, loved Joseph best of all his sons, for he was the child of his old age. And he had made him an ornamental tunic, a coat of many colors. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him, so they could not speak a friendly word to him. Once Joseph had a dream which he told to his brothers, and they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding sheaves in the field when suddenly my sheaf stood up and remained upright. Then your sheaves gathered around and bowed low to my sheaf." His brothers answered, "Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule over us?" And they hated him even more for his talk about his dreams. Really, the Hebrew is, they hated him for his dreams and for his words. Not only the dreams themselves, but that he dared to tell the brothers these things. He dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I've had another dream. This time the sun, the moon, the 11 stars were bowing down to me." And when he told it to his father and his brothers, his father berated him. "What," he said, "is this dream you have dreamed? Are we to come, I and your mother, the sun and the moon, and your brothers, the 11 stars?" In other words, the sun and the moon, the 11 stars of the dream, are understood by Jacob as representing the family. "Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow low to you to the ground?" So his brothers were wrought up at him, and his father kept the matter in mind. What are the elements of the pathology here?
The father's favoritism.
Right. Why? Why did he do it?
Tends to set in motion the way that Joseph even behaves toward his brothers, because he knows he sort of always has his father's blessing and his brother has his back.
Why? Why does Joseph have his father's back? I take it you mean
No, I think-
uniquely.
I think that Joseph feels that he can speak to his brothers like he does.
Yes.
Because his father has always shown him that he can get away with things.
And why, according to the story?
Because he was the youngest.
Because he was the father of his old age. That's stated explicitly.
Child, not the father.
I'm sorry?
He's a child.
He's the child, yeah. What is implicit here and not explicit? He's the only son of Rachel.
I was gonna ask you, whose
Because his mother.
children
Right, Joseph and Benjamin. So there's favoritism for two reasons, and two plausible reasons, right? So the favoritism is not gratuitous, it's bound up in the elements of the family structure. True? Okay. What else is problematic in this story?
Thank you. There's been a feedback and it suddenly stopped. I mean, tone.
It's the air.
It's the air conditioner.
Oh, you're talking about, okay, thinking of it, feedback. Okay. What else? What else?
I think that the brothers were aware of him being the favorite, so the father wasn't very subtle about it.
Exactly. So not only is the family structure problematic, or as we might say, family structure is always potentially problematic. In when there are several children, one is the firstborn. One may be born at a felicitous moment. There may be 4 sons, and the mother and father are looking for a daughter, and here she comes as the 5th child. I mean, there are a lot of ways in which the family structure can create problems, right? On top of which, Jacob is not very subtle about it. And he displays his favoritism, which then arouses the ire of his other children. Jordan?
To be generous, Joseph is a jerk. He's a tattletale. He's an egoist. If he tells one dream, he doesn't learn, he's going to tell another dream. And he's glorying in his father's favoritism.
Very good. So that Jacob's a problem. The family structure is potentially, I don't want to say family structure is destiny, but it certainly can create problems. And Joseph is a problem, right? Joseph is bragging to the brothers. He's goading them on. He's telling a dream after all. Now, if one thinks that dreams are communications, as is often the case in the ancient world, then what Joseph is telling the brothers comes to them as a kind of fait accompli. You had this dream. I mean, in a certain way, Freud is very biblical in this sense, with the difference that in the biblical, for both the Bible and for Freud, dreams are meaningful. For the Bible, the meaning comes from above. For Freud, the meaning comes from below, within ourselves. But this idea that dreams are meaningful exacerbates the situation. And Joseph tells it again, okay? So that we have, aside from a potentially problematic family structure, compromised human beings. And the brothers react to it by hating him. So that, what are the features of there? There's jealousy, there's bragging, there's favoritism, there's hatred. So this is a very, very problematic brew, isn't it? And as the story unfolds, the implications of this are carried out, aren't they?
I don't know that this existed prior to the revelation of God coming to or the 3 men, or the 2 wise men, or whatever.
Okay.
Whoever it was. But the idea of primogeniture, which the first son inherits everything,
Yeah.
is totally turned upside down.
As the book of Genesis and beyond turns it upside down. I mean, the Bible, one of the themes of the Bible is a war against the law of primogeniture. It's not the first son who prevails throughout, right? Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers, Cain and Abel, Moses and Aaron, David's brothers and David. So one could say that the law of primogeniture learns its imperative from nature. And to fight that law is to imply that nature is not a good guide for how to live our lives. We need law, we need ethics, we need culture. Let's go ahead here to verse 18 in Genesis 37. So the brothers go out to shepherd the place, and Jacob sends Joseph out to bring back a report. That was pretty insensitive of Jacob. Verse 18, the brothers saw him from afar, and before he came close to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, here comes that dreamer. Come now, let us kill him, throw him into one of the pits, and we can say a savage beast devoured him. We shall see what comes of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, he tried to save him from them. He said, let us not take his life. And Reuben went on, shed no blood, cast him into the pit out in the wilderness, but don't touch him yourselves, intending to save him from them and to restore him to his father. When Joseph came up to his brothers, they stripped him of his tunic, the ornamented tunic that he was wearing, took him and cast him into the pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. I'm going to just make a comment about that last sentence, which contains a redundancy. The pit was empty. That means there was no water in it. Why do they have to then add there was no water in it? One of the assumptions behind rabbinic commentary is what we might call the economy of divine expression. The text never says a redundancy. If it can say it simply, it doesn't say it complexly. So if there's an apparent redundancy, that means something else is being communicated. And here's what the rabbis make of this. The pit was empty. There was no water in it, but there were snakes. Okay? Which interpretation just carries a little further the antipathy of the brothers. Okay, so what we have here is Joseph is on his way to Egypt. He gets thrown into a prison and so on and so on. And he is able, through his wits, his intelligence, and so on, his self-control, to rise very high. There's a famine all over the Middle East. Joseph has devised a plan to save grain for the years of famine. So the Egyptians are well served, but the famine extends to Canaan, where Jacob and the sons live. And Jacob sends the sons down to Egypt to get grain. And lo and behold, the brothers confront Joseph, who is the grain manager, so to speak. He recognizes them. They do not recognize him. Okay? So I don't know about you. If I'm writing this story, I'm going to make sure that Joseph gets his comeuppance and really makes the brothers suffer, which he does. He puts them through their paces. Let's turn to chapter 43, verse 26. When Joseph came home, the brothers are now in Egypt, the brothers, presented to him the gifts they had brought with them into the house, bowing low before him to the ground. He greeted them and he said, how's your aged father? Now, what happened? The culmination of this rush through the story is to see how and why Joseph reacts as he finally does. So we want to try to look at motivation for his surprising action at the climax of the story. So let's pay attention to what's going on here. Verse 26 again. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts they had brought with them into the house, bowing low before him to the ground. He greeted them and said, "How is your aged father of whom you spoke?" He doesn't let on that it's also his father. "Is he still in good health?" They replied, "It is well with your servant, our father. He's still in good health." And they bowed and made obeisance. Looking about, he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and asked, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he went on, "May God be gracious to you, my boy." With that, Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother and was on the verge of tears. He went into a room and wept there. Okay? So that conveys something to us about Joseph's state of mind. Let's now go to chapter 44. What Joseph does is he sets the brothers up. He sends them back with grain. They have brought down money. He restores the money to their bags. And he puts his favorite cup in Benjamin's bag. And then he sends his own men out after them. Verse 11 of chapter 44. So each one hastened to lower his bag to the ground, and each one opened his bag. He searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. You can imagine this depicted on the stage or on the screen. The growing drama of, we know it's going to be in Benjamin's bag, ending up with the youngest. And the goblet turned up in Benjamin's bag, and they rent their clothes. Each reloaded his pack animal, and they returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers re-entered the house of Joseph, who was still there, they threw themselves on the ground before him. Joseph said to them, "What is this deed that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me practices divination?" Judah replied, "What can we say to my Lord? How can we plead? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered the crime of your servants." Do you sense the ambiguity in that question? They refer explicitly to the crime of the theft. That's what Joseph's accusing them. But are they also bearing guilt for what they did many years before to Joseph? So there is some ambiguity here, and if you accept that there's ambiguity, there's psychological insight in the authors raising that question. Here we are then, slaves of my Lord, the rest of us, as much as he in whose possession the goblet was found. But he replied, "Far be it from me to act thus. Only he," notice how clever Joseph is. The brothers are saying through Judah, "We're all guilty." What Joseph is saying is, "I'm not seeing it that way. Only the person in whose bag the goblet was found will be held guilty and punished. Only he in whose possession the goblet was found shall be my slave. The rest of you, go back in peace to your father." Do you notice how amazing the author is here? What situation do we have now? The exact duplicate of the situation many years before with Joseph. The favorite of the father, who the brothers can sacrifice once again. You know, this idea of teshuvah in Judaism, there are two kinds of teshuvah. I'm sorry, with a process, or teshuvah shlema, complete repentance. Complete repentance is, not only do I say I'm sorry and make amends, but when I'm confronted with the exact same situation in which I sinned, I don't do it. That's why Maimonides cites a quote from Proverbs. If you're going to do the right thing, hurry and do it because time is a-fleeing. If there's lust, you'd better, and are confronted and have violated the commandment against lust, and you're waiting for a time when you're confronted with the lust temptation again, and you're very, very old, you won't have a chance for complete repentance, okay? This is that situation. The brothers are not only now able to apologize and make amends if that works, but precisely the same situation arises again. And what will they do? One could say this is a tribute by the author to Joseph, who was clever enough to see whether or not they have changed their ways. Here comes Judah. So let's read Judah's speech and then Joseph's reaction and see what is going on here. Ellen?
Do we get the feeling that they hate Benjamin like they hated Joseph?
Yeah, it doesn't really say that. So it's a good point. I mean, the circumstances are not completely the same. Benjamin's not a braggart. He's not dreaming. At least we don't get anything about that.
Just the youngest.
He's the youngest, and therefore Jacob may very well have been acting toward Benjamin the way he acted toward Joseph in the presence of the brothers. So let's make the assumption that though Joseph is not replaced in this situation by Benjamin, the father is still in the set of circumstances and the same favoritism, okay? And I think that your question leads to an interesting addition here. Are the brothers going to change their response, given the opportunity to do the same thing again, when the circumstances are the same? Favoritism. Because their response is very different. Then Judah, verse 18. Notice this is the beginning of a Torah portion. Went up to him and said, "Please, my Lord, let your servant appeal to my Lord, and don't be impatient with your servant, you who are the equal of Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servants, 'Have you a father or another brother?' We told my Lord, 'We have an old father, and there is a child of his old age, the youngest. His full brother is dead.'" So that's Joseph, when they believe is dead, obviously. "So that he alone is left of his mother, and his father dotes on him." Well, there it's made very explicit. "Then you said to your servants," by the way, if they were offered the opportunity the last time that they're offered this time, they would have sacrificed Benjamin as they sacrificed Joseph, because they still are reeling from the favoritism, or they still at least know it. Verse 21, "Then you said to your servants, 'Bring him down to me, that I may set eyes on him.' And we said to my Lord, 'The boy can't leave his father. If we were to leave him, his father would die.' But you said to your servants, 'Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, don't let me see your faces.' When we came back to your servant, my father, we reported my Lord's words to him. And later our father said, 'Go,'" because you remember, Jacob didn't want to send them down right away, so there was a long delay. "Later our father said, 'Go back and procure some food for us.' We answered, 'We can't go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us can we go down, for we may not show our faces to the man unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said to us, as you know, my wife bore me 2 sons.'" That had to hurt, didn't it? My wife? What about his wives and their sons? "But one is gone from me, and I said, alas, he was torn by a beast." Because you remember, the brothers killed an animal and brought the bloody tunic. "And I've not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and he meets with disaster, you will send my white head down to Sheol in sorrow." Let's suppose that we are the brothers. And Judah says to Benjamin, to Joseph, "If Benjamin doesn't come back, our father is giving up." How do we feel about that? What about us? What about the rest of his children? Does his well-being depend only on the sons of Rachel? So the brothers have yet another reason to be upset, to be angry, to be resentful. Verse 30. Now if I come to your servant my father and the boy is not with us, since his own life is so bound up with his, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will send the white head of your servant our father down to Sheol in grief. Now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father, saying, if I don't bring him back to you, I shall stand guilty before my father forever. Therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my Lord instead of the boy. And let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be witness to the woe that would overtake my father. Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone withdraw from me. So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still well? But his brothers couldn't answer him, so dumbfounded were they on account of him. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come forward to me. And they came forward, and he said, I'm your brother Joseph, he whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me here. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. It is now 2 years that there has been famine in the land, and there are still 5 years to come in which there shall be no yield from tilling. God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his household, and ruler over the whole land of Egypt. So this is all about character, isn't it? About the attributes of the brothers and of Joseph that has enabled the story to arrive at this moment. So we're dealing with morality. We're dealing with ways of dealing with situations. There are no commandments here. This is not Exodus. This isn't the Ten Commandments. This isn't the Holiness Code. This is a narrative in which dilemmas of character and situation are presented. So let's ask ourselves, what are the moral features? What are the motivating features that generate this story so that it arrives at this moment? What makes it possible in terms of the reactions of the individuals to the situation? Time. What do you think time has to do with it?
It probably lessens the hurt.
Okay. Okay.
I like to give the brothers some credit that when they were younger, they may not have been as reasonable or as mature or realized how seriously they were going to wound their father. And I think that they loved their father and wanted to honor him, and that's why they wouldn't let Benjamin stay there, and they all went back.
Okay.
And they were defending them.
So is there anything, so time, maturation leads to a different kind of reaction. Does this is there a surprise in this reaction of theirs? Regard for the father?
So Surprised by Joseph, you mean?
So,
Are you su-
no, are we surprised that Judah, speaking for the brothers, reacts in this way about the father? We might say,
Yeah, we
what's
are.
surprising about it?
It is surprising.
Why? What?
Because it's so unlike the previous
Exactly.
disregard for his
So
thought.
so they react at the beginning, let's call it X. And they react now, let's call it Y. What is the dynamic that leads from the expected X reaction to the actual Y reaction? What has happened here?
Experience.
I think that they had an unfinished business, and I think that they had plenty of guilt feelings concerning the betrayal of the youngest brother, and I think that it resonated within, and they said, we cannot do it again.
Very good. So what does this amount to? Self-recognition. We did something wrong. We don't see any remorse at the beginning. That they have cultivated some remorse, which is a function of introspection. Or conscience, of course. For conscience to apply, they have to appeal to their we are being burdened by our consciences. Okay, so they have grown. But there is something surprising about not only that they changed their mind, but they changed their mind about their father. Because after all, they represent the father as still playing favorites. They don't say, we're being this way about our father because we see that our father has changed. Jacob hasn't changed. I mean, the one really problematic individual in this whole story is Jacob, who himself doesn't learn from experience, doesn't seem to grow. So what is it that allows the brothers, given that the situation is the same, favoritism, nevertheless to care about the father? What do they have to have done to do that?
He's older.
I'm sorry?
His father is older.
Okay.
Closer to his death, and they've already caused one death. They probably don't want to cause another one.
They feel for the father's position and set of circumstances, which they didn't before. When they sold Joseph, they decided to kill an animal, take its coat, and here, Dad, without any sense of how this might impact the father. Now they are concerned for how this will impact the father.
But they've seen, since that time when they brought the bloody tunic to his father, they saw how his father reacted. And over the years, his father has never gotten over that. And you know, the deep love that he had for Joseph, whether he transferred it all to Benjamin or not, there was, certainly he felt very close to Benjamin. So the brothers have seen the consequences of their own behaviors. They've lived it for all of these years, have felt obviously some sense of guilt, or at least Judah feels some sense of guilt, and realizes, if this were to happen again, our father isn't going to be,
He won't get over it.
he obviously won't get over it, just as he didn't get over it with Joseph. In fact, it will send him to his grave.
So they recognize their guilt through acts of conscience or introspection. They've also, through experience and time, come to feel something different about the father. How would you describe how they feel about him now? Don't you think they've come to recognize, this is a speculation, that Jacob is human and that he's made some mistakes. The mistakes have hurt them, but they come, Freud's idea that to understand is to forgive. And they do see that this is a fragile, flawed human being, and they're warming to him and his needs. What do you think about that? Jordan, you had a comment you want to make, didn't you?
Yeah, but I'm a little confused because, first of all, we can't treat all the brothers the same. When this first started, Reuben kept him from being killed.
Right.
Granted, the next best thing, he knew he wasn't going to save him completely, but they sold him into slavery rather than killing him outright. Now we come in with Judah, recognizing that he has to do something to save the new Joseph, Benjamin. So with Reuben and all this, and was this just written by the Judahites? Because otherwise we'd be called Reubenish instead.
Very good, very good. Yeah, what we see in the book of Genesis, actually, Judah's the fourth born. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. But you remember the story of Judah and Tamar in chapter 38. So the biblical author may very well have known what happens to the brothers when they become tribes and how Judah becomes the prominent tribe, because in a way the author is retrodicting back into the past what will come to pass. Right.
The other question is,
Yeah.
you talked about the family dynamics, but we have 3 wives, and we have lots of stories of the wives having difficulty with the second, presumably the third wife, from Sarah, the first one, on up. Now, time and maturity happened, but also separated from their other primary influencer, their mother. And the mother's anger or ire at the other wives may no longer be as palpable to them.
Very good. So the family situation may very well have changed. We don't have any evidence for that, except that they're not there now.
And they're older, which is...
And they're older.
And they're fathers. And they are fathers.
Are they? Well, Judah certainly is. I don't know that we know about the...
I'm pretty sure.
You're pretty sure they
I'm
are?
pretty sure. By this stage in their lives, if Joseph was the second youngest, they're all fathers.
Let's say you're right. I mean, there's no evidence for it, but let's say you're right. Maybe being a father enables you to have sympathy for your own father. I mean, the Oedipal situation now is reversed, and maybe you can recognize that the tension between the son and the father.
Or at least Judah did.
I'm sorry?
Or at least Judah did.
Or at least Judah does. Yeah. Okay. So don't you think that it's fair to say that we are in the presence of some moral dynamics when the issue of sympathy for the father, when an acknowledgement of their own guilt now rises to the surface, uncommanded but palpable nevertheless? This is a moral tale. I'm not saying a morality tale, but a moral tale. The next question, then Maya, is why does Joseph react the way he does? We can see why the brothers may have reacted the way they did. Now we have to ask ourselves about Judah. What is his reaction? Maya, comment, question?
I want to defend the brothers. When he is telling, Joseph is telling the 2 dreams, it seems to be that the father is not very happy with him. What you want me to... So I think that maybe the brothers interpreted that selling or killing is not going to be such a terrible thing, because after all the father was not very happy with these prophecies. So I think that in retrospect, after seeing the father's devastation, they realized, well, we maybe overstepped it.
We may be
Overstep,
Overstepping.
overstepping,
by doing what?
by killing.
Oh, I see. You mean at the time they may not have felt that because
Because the father together with them was not very happy with the show-off kid.
So to protect the father at that early point was not as important to them as it comes to be through their maturation, their growth, their understanding of the father. Yeah, they don't want to hurt the father now. Yeah.
I think of it as a teenage prank, that they were gonna fool their dad, and, Joseph was gonna come home in a couple of days. That they just put him in a pit. They didn't.
And then they sold him.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they sold him.
So he's gone.
It was rather impulsive.
What?
And they kind of came up with, it was impulsive, they came up with the
And
plan.
it was impulsive.
As he was
And that's the way
walking toward
teenagers
them.
act, they don't
Yeah.
think things.
And then all of a sudden, these
No,
other
it was-
people are coming along and they're like, sell them.
And it's bullying.
But-
In a certain sense too. And
Th-
it's stuff that happens all the time today, it's just in a different context.
However you judge the act, we can't deny that there are hot, rivalrous passions at work, which have centrifugal impact on the family. They're likely to blow the family apart. Well, you may think that's a prank, but we certainly see there are some deeply problematic impulses at work in this family situation. True?
A little less than Cain and Abel, but no.
But still, the sibling rivalry business, Eve, when she gives birth to Cain, says, now I have that. So I'm just going to go back to chapter 4 here. When she gives birth to Cain, the firstborn, she says, the translation is, now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I've gained a male child with the help of the Lord. That's a very orthodox thing to say. God has helped me. Unfortunately, the Hebrew doesn't say this. The Hebrew says, and she said, I have purchased or created a child along with the Lord, et Adonai. It doesn't say with the help of. So one could say that she is really arrogating to herself divine powers. Look what I've been able to do. That's Cain. She doesn't say the same thing when she bears Abel. So right there at the beginning is the implication of parental, that's the primogeniture thing. After all, Cain and not Abel opens her womb. That's part of the power of the firstborn. Let's go to Joseph.
We're kind of overlooking or negating or not giving power to the fact that were it not for Reuben, they would have killed him.
Absolutely.
And they were willing to be killers.
That's right.
And of course, that's one of the no-nos.
And they could have symbolically killed Benjamin right now. I mean, if they followed what Joseph had in mind, Benjamin's gone for good. They go back home, and there's Benjamin.
But they tried to take responsibility for it too.
Say that again?
The brothers tried to take responsibility for it too.
When? Now?
With the cup.
Yes, right.
Throw Benjamin under the bus.
That's-
They tried to protect him.
Right. So that's a sign of the change in the brother's attitude toward a favorite son. You almost think that the author gave Rachel two sons in order to make this story happen, because they're involved in parallel danger. So the brothers have grown. What about Joseph? How do we explain Joseph's response? He's been brutal to the brothers up to this point. And one could imagine he's been brutal to them, put them through their paces, and brought them to this moment when it looks like the thing is over for the brothers. They have a big dilemma to face. Why does Joseph respond the way he does?
Well, he was just testing them. It was manipulative.
Right.
So certainly, it wasn't being kind, but
Right.
I don't know if brutal I don't think he had that hostility. I think he was just testing them to see if they had changed, if there was growth, and,
You think Joseph's getting a little kick out of this
I
process?
think so.
A resentment kick?
No,
No?
because I think he is honest when he says, look where I am now. All my dreams came true. You guys are all bowing to me,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
look at my life. It wouldn't have been the same if I had stayed. We would have all starved.
I know I'm getting a little resentment kick out of it if I'm Joseph. See the brothers suffer a
Maybe
little
he has
bit
more aspirational morality.
than I do.
But he
That's been
dreamt
clear
it.
from the start, hasn't it?
But he dreamt it, he knew what was gonna happen. He believed himself.
Yeah. Well, it turns out, yeah. Look, I mean, there's an interesting change of terms here. Because what does he say here? Look, the brothers are bowing down to him. And he might say, my dream has come true. Does he say this? No, what does he say? I'm an instrument of a divine plan. It's not really about me, except that I am necessary for this plan. So he misunderstood the meaning of his own dreams. You're bowing down to me not because I'm so great, but because, oh, thank you so much, but because I'm an instrument in a plan. So I think there's more to say about that, but what else is going on here?
What about the arrogance, though?
Of,
Joseph,
namely,
what you just said.
that I'm an
All my
instrument.
dreams came true, you all are bowing down to me, now I can afford to do a little
But he
trick.
didn't interpret it the same as he did when he was younger. Now he's interpreting the bowing differently,
Right.
now that he sees how it turned out.
He's not the last move in this drama. The last move in the drama of the dreams is you're bowing down to me. Here, this is the penultimate move. You're bowing down to me because God has a plan for which I am an instrument. In a way, he subordinates himself to the plan.
Okay, so here's Joseph. He is the ruler of Egypt, according to him.
Right.
Why didn't he ever send out feelers to see what was happening to his family?
Excellent
He could
question.
have done that.
Yes.
So,
And why do you, and you have a speculation as to why?
no, it just now occurred to me to even question that.
And by the way, the rabbis in their interpretation point this out to Joseph's detriment. He could have easily, in those, 17 years, gotten word back to his father.
Right.
What might that mean?
Send a bag of grain to him, right?
In a way, that might be some evidence for Jackie's point, that here we have a very arrogant guy. He was not concerned about his father's well-being. He could write a little note and put it on a camel and send it back. I'm okay.
He could send spies and see how his mother's doing.
There you go. So that's a negative thing about Joseph. Right.
And she died already before he,
Who?
How would he know?
Rachel.
Rachel has died,
She
yes.
died before he was kidnapped.
But he doesn't know it. We don't have any evidence that he knows it.
I mean, when was Benjamin born? After he was?
Benjamin was born, she died in childbirth, I believe.
Was Benjamin around? Well,
Benjamin was around, because I think Benjamin is born in chapter 35, and chapter 37 opens the Joseph story. You know, Aviva Zornberg in another book makes the following speculation, and some of you have heard me reiterate her point, that what Joseph says here to the brothers is a therapeutic narrative, that he makes up a story in order to assuage their guilt. You meant this for evil, but God meant it for good, because there is a plan. And although I can't excuse you for your moral problems. Nevertheless, it's part of a larger plan. And an interesting question for which I think we have no answer is, does Joseph believe this? Or is he really making up a narrative to assuage the brothers? Why Joseph breaks down here? It's not only that he gives them a reason. Joseph could no longer, that's the first thing that is said here after Judah finishes his speech. Joseph could no longer control himself, and he cried out and so on. His sobs were so loud. How do you understand the intense reaction of Joseph?
A reuniting.
Okay, he moves toward reconciliation so that he's moved by some healing of the rupture. Okay, good.
And also, to confirm what you said, is that now he feels the guilt. Why did I abandon them? Why did it have to happen instead of sending them an email or whatever?
Right, a text. Okay, so he's moved by the beginnings of the process of reconciliation. He also feels his own guilt, and it comes out now. Good. I mean, who knows if these things are true, but they're plausible. What makes them plausible? Because we recognize ourselves in this situation, don't we? That's the psychological astuteness of the author. Anything else? Jordan?
Yeah, I stepped out to get some of the coffee, so I may have missed it. But going back about why does he feel differently, why do the brothers feel differently about Benjamin? We had at least 2 occasions where they talked about the hate the brothers had for Joseph. And there's nothing like that with Benjamin.
Yes.
And I go back to my original statement, Benjamin's not a jerk. And Joseph,
Benjamin's not a jerk. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, right.
So there's no indication of hatred, whereas there was double or triple times that it was mentioned that they hated Joseph.
And what's that answer an answer to? What question is this an answer to?
Why were the brothers eager to save Benjamin and they were eager to kill or sell Joseph away?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And
Okay.
Joseph wanted to save Benjamin. Because I'm speculating that in his mind, his older brothers are treating Benjamin the same way that they had treated him.
And he gives them the opportunity to do it. So,
I don't know, I was just gonna say, and he's the only blood relative.
full, yeah, same father. So why does Joseph break down? The possibility of reconciliation is initiated. He's feeling some guilt and he has some release. Benjamin, he doesn't know that Benjamin is not the same kind of person that Joseph is, does he?
Well, until he was sold into slavery, they were brothers.
Okay, all right. So he's pleased to see not only his full brother, but a good guy, something like a good guy. Could it also be, this is what impresses me, he's moved at Judah's solicitude toward their father, because he might feel Judah has every reason not to care deeply, not to be willing to sacrifice himself for his father. And Joseph, I think, is moved by this because he recognizes a change of heart in Judah, who here represents the brothers, right? I mean, we don't know this, but the brothers must have agreed that we're going to go along with how you present yourself here. Okay, Maya?
I think that's the beauty of reading the text, because it's very minimalistic and it enables us to project our feelings on it.
Right.
Or it's not verbose, like the sacrifice of Isaac. he went, he took, went, and you can fill the blanks.
Right, right. And so we are brought to add some interpretations. And what is it that helps us to figure out which of the many interpretations we could make, which ones have power to us? I mean, we don't agree on everything that we've said around the table, but we do agree on several things. Is it because we are part of the human condition and recognize these emotions and the possibilities of change? What gives them plausibility?
An Eskimo would probably have different interpretations.
Yeah, but I think we feel that our interpretations are not gratuitous, that there's power in what we've been saying, even though we don't agree with each other on everything.
I think it's the aspiration or the hope of families that are perfect, or families that get along, or families that are homogeneous and have something special. And, you know, if they don't have that, they feel an emptiness and they miss it.
Who's
and
they?
That's what people aspire to.
And who's
We
they?
aspire to it as children, we aspire to it as parents, and the brothers are aspiring to that and reacting to it, and so is Joseph.
Interesting.
He wants that family to congeal and
Who's
get
he?
together.
Who's he?
Joseph.
Joseph.
And Joseph wants to do that because he realized he's missed it.
So let me offer a rephrasing of what you've said. Tell me if I'm getting your point. That this is a family in deep trouble, and they come to heal themselves as we hope that our troubled families will find ways to do it. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
I also think that Joseph is glad that his father's still alive.
Yes, absolutely. So he's learned something, which is part of why he's so moved.
Right.
His reaction is so powerful, isn't it? And I think we've uncovered several plausible reasons. He has his wits about him enough that if Zornberg is right, he makes up a story to make the brothers feel as if they played a role in a larger process. Because now the family is back together again. Jacob's going to come down and they're going to live there. And for hundreds of years in peace. Do we have time? It's 10 to 9 to move to the Ruth story a little bit. What do you think? Let's try it. And let's do this. We'll stop when the last person leaves.
By the way, I read that Ruth is being read on Shavuos because Ruth is the progenitor of King David, and I don't know what has King David to do with Shavuos, but anyway.
Yeah. No, I don't think King David has anything to do with Shavuot. Here's what I feel the connection is, that Shavuot celebrates the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. Zman Matan Torah Tenu, the giving of it. When is the Torah going to be received? I mean, just because it's given doesn't mean it's received. Ruth receives it. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. So in a way, Ruth is the other side of the giving of the Torah. And by the way, she doesn't receive it as commanded. She receives it out of the depth of her own heart and her own emotions. In other words, she receives Torah as something to be lived and not just to be acknowledged, right? So she receives the spirit of Torah and is also a convert, so to speak. I mean, even though there's no conversion. Let's look at Ruth chapter 1. So what I think we ought to do is think about the motivations of the players here. In the days when the judges judged, by the way, Ruth is part of the 5 Megillot in the Bible, right? Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. Each one of the Megillot, the scrolls, is read at a given holiday. In the Septuagint, which is the Old Testament of the church, Ruth follows the book of Judges. There are no Megillot in the Christian Old Testament. And the reason is that it opens in the days when the judges judged. So it must be put historically with the book of Judges. Although the Jewish tradition has placed Ruth in a different, out of a different reason. In the days when the judges, chieftains ruled, I wish they said judges judged, because that's it, shofet ha-shoftim, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah with his wife and 2 sons went to reside in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi. His 2 sons named Machlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Benjamin and Judah. They came to the country of Moab and remained there. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. She was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and one named Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years. Then those 2, Machlon and Chilion, also died. So the woman was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. Notice what the author has accomplished in 5 sentences. Look at what Naomi is confronted with. She's in a foreign land. She's had to go there because of a famine. She went with her husband and her sons. The 3 of them have died. And she's left with 2 Moabite daughters-in-law. The Moabites are traditional enemies of the Israelites. So her situation couldn't be more dire. Think of the issue of famine. It's presented here as a real event. But if you think of famine as a metaphor, that is a story filled with privation. This is a story of Naomi, whose life is replete with privation, replete with emptiness, full with emptiness. And how is her situation going to be resolved? And of course the answer is Ruth. Ruth is the answer to the famine of Naomi's life, aside from the real famine. Elimelech, Naomi's husband. By the way, at the very end of this chapter, the last sentence of chapter 1 is, they, Ruth and Naomi, arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. The famine is now upturning, and in 2 ways. Literally, and Ruth and Naomi are now in a situation to solve the family's problem. And Ruth solves it. And one of the outcomes of Ruth's solution is King David, who is another answer to the larger famine. So this story works on a literal level and on a metaphorical level.
Shavuot, the harvesting of the harvest.
And Shavuot is the first harvest.
It's nice and neat, isn't
And
it?
a lot of stuff is being packed in here. So verse 6, she started out with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for in the country of Moab she had heard that the Lord had taken note of his people and given them food. So in a literal sense, the famine is being ameliorated, if not ended. Accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living, and they set out on the road back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Turn back each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." Okay? So you've dealt kindly with me because you're willing to accompany me back. How are they dealing kindly with the dead? Through the institution of levirate marriage. Levirate marriage is that when a husband dies, the brother of the husband and his widow have to have relations and raise up a son to be the inheritor of his brother's wealth and to carry on his name. So she's already anticipating the need for a levirate marriage here, and that Ruth is going to be the one counted on to go along with that. What she does, of course, is she doesn't just passively go along, she initiates the process. And by the way, levirate marriage is an Israelite custom. Ruth is not an Israelite, and therefore she has no obligation to fulfill this commandment.
Couldn't it mean that she did well with the husbands while they were alive? Right, speaking right now, you did kindly to your husbands. They're now dead, so you did kindly to the dead.
I think that's a plausible interpretation. You have dealt, may the Lord deal with you as you have dealt. Okay, that's good, that's good. I think the levirate marriage comes up unmistakably, but this is not necessarily the moment. That's your point. I'm sorry?
Plant and payoff.
Yeah, plant and payoff. Good. Yeah, what is Henry James, I think, says that when you when you reveal a gun in a story, you'd better use it. Otherwise, why have you put it there? Okay. May the Lord grant that you each find security in the house of a husband. I want to, this may be a little complicated, but it's one of the amazing moments in biblical literature, because what we have here is a chiastic structure. A chiastic structure is ABA, or ABCBA. So there's symmetry in a chiastic structure, but the chiastic structure also delineates a unit, right? Because it ends as it begins. Think of it here. Verse 8, but Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, turn back, okay, each of you to her mother's house, let's call that A. May the Lord deal kindly with you, let's call that B. As you have dealt with the dead and with me, let's call that C. May the Lord grant each of you, that's B again, right? At the beginning, each of your mother's house, may the Lord deal kindly. And now we have, may the Lord grant that each of you, that's B again. Find security in the house, in a house. So the A terms is house. The B terms is our, may God deal kindly with you. The C term, which in a chiastic structure is now the crucial moment, because if you think of it as a triangle, C is the acme of the process. A, B, C. So what is C? May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. What is that saying? May God take his cue from how you have acted. May the Lord do the kind of thing that you have done. This is a celebration of Ruth and Naomi, who have become, in this phrasing, a model for God. And she kissed them farewell. They broke into weeping, and she said, no, we will return with you to your people. Their first, Naomi says, go back. What's Naomi's motivation in telling them to go back?
They're not Jewish, they have no obligation to her.
Okay, and what's she feel about this? What does this lead her to feel?
Well, that she has an obligation to let them go.
She wants the best for them. You have no obligation to come with me. You've got a life.
And you have a family.
I'm sorry?
And you have a family that you should reunite with them.
To her own detriment, we might say, because if they do that, she is now traveling in foreign country all by herself back. But she defers to their needs. One of the pervasive elements in the Ruth story is kindness. Kindness of people to one another. It's hard to command kindness. You can't say you shall be kind in a set of commandments. So this once again is a moral quality that is revealed. We might say even aspirationally. This is a morality of aspiration. This is how people should act. We should defer our needs to those of others. Of course, it can be taken too far. We have an obligation to take care of ourselves as well. But Naomi replied, verse 11, "Turn back, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I more sons in my body?" This is the Levirate thing, isn't it? "Have I any more sons in my body who might be husbands for you? I'm not pregnant now. Turn back, my daughters, for I am too old even to be married. Even if I thought there was a hope for me, even were I married tonight and also bore sons, should you wait for them to grow up?" In other words, I want you to go home for your own sake, and look at how improbable it is that your motivation for coming with me, if it is levirate marriage to do your duty, look at how improbable it's going to be to even pull that off. "Should you, on their account, debar yourselves from your own marriages? Oh no, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours." By the way, the word Naomi means pleasant. Naomi's situation is anything but pleasant. It's bitter. "For the hand of the Lord has struck out against me." I think that nowhere in Job does ever Job say something so intense as this. This is a Job story in a certain way. "They broke into weeping again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell. But Ruth clung to her." Now the Hebrew syntax is very interesting because generally the verb comes before the noun. But here, she kissed her mother-in-law, varut davka ba. When they put the noun first, this is to emphasize the noun. So we might read it, Orpah followed the will of Naomi, but as for Ruth, she cleaved to Naomi. So this is a celebration of Ruth. Is it a critique of Orpah?
No.
In what sense? Why is it not a critique of Orpah?
Because that's what Naomi told her to do.
Okay, right?
It's logical and very, there's no criticism of her for going back.
Right. There's every...
Encouragement, right.
So in other words, what's interesting to me, here's how I put this. For Ruth to be extraordinary, we don't have to have Orpah be bad. Orpah is good. Ruth is extraordinary.
It works even better to have Orpah just being good and not.
It's better. Why?
Because I think it emphasizes Ruth's nobility that much more.
Agreed. And in the hands of a lesser author, I think there would have been a greater moral distinction between Ruth and Orpah. But the author is willing to find Orpah's move entirely justified. Let's go on just a little bit. So they broke into weeping, Orpah did it, and so on, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go follow your sister-in-law." But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." Okay, so very famous comment by Ruth. What animates it? What's her motivation here?
Loyalty?
I'm sorry?
Loyalty?
Loyalty to Naomi, I think, because she says here over and over again, your people, your God, where you die. So she is casting her lot with a foreign woman, going back to a foreign land, just as Moab is foreign to the Bethlemelites, Bethlehem is foreign to the Moabites. She's going into enemy territory out of loyalty for her mother-in-law.
Well, it might be love.
Yeah.
And it could be love. Yep, right. Loyalty and love.
It could be despair.
What's the despair?
She's despaired because her husband died, and she feels alone, and Naomi's willing to take her under her wing.
And going back to her own family would not completely ameliorate the despair.
Right.
Well, because Ruth is part of her husband.
That's right, and that's part of it too.
Very good, very good. So, multiple motivations: loyalty, love, neediness of her own. Maybe that's a softer kind of despair, but on that continuum.
Exactly.
Good.
And maybe the family would say, you married a Jew, now you look for your own salvation.
Very good. So she's looking out for Naomi. She loves Naomi. She's loyal to Naomi. But she's also looking out for herself. Her motivations are self-serving as well as other-serving. What an ideal way to live a life, to care about others without pushing your own needs aside.
Is there anything theological involved? Because the last line is, your Lord will be my Lord.
Yeah,
And, it's not only accepting her, Naomi, and her people, but also her God.
exactly. And also her eternity. She'll be buried with Naomi. Yeah, I think there's a sense here. See, when Naomi says to them, go back to your families and your gods, there's a sense here that the gods are local gods, that they're tied to a particular spot. So nevertheless, that doesn't mitigate or qualify Ruth's, but she's not, I think yet in this story, we don't have a universal God. We may have each people has its own gods, but nevertheless, it's a religious motivation to attach themselves to their gods. Okay, I promised that we would stop at 9. Let's do it. But here again, just like the Joseph story, we could see it in the David story, a morality of aspiration, a moral ethos that isn't thou shalt do and thou shalt not do, and that the stories give us these moral characteristics and qualities.
Well, may I ask, why did you say these are not morality stories? I think the whole
They are
Bible
morality
is
stories.
morality stories.
Yeah, because I think that, exactly, that was the point, that we think that, Lon Fuller was quoted at the beginning, of thinking that you only find a morality of aspiration with the Greeks, and that what you have in the Bible are do's and don'ts, laws. And really, in some way, that's part of the inheritance of Pauline Christianity, where he focuses on the law and the law is now over, as if this is the sum and substance of what the Old Testament is. And I think what Aviva Zornberg and Lichtenstein are saying, and which we have illustrated, is there's plenty of morality going on, not just through command, but through noticing how people act and how they're praised for how they act by the biblical author. So it's another way of thinking about moral behavior, moral standards. Okay, so Chag Sameach. I hope everybody enjoys the holiday.
So what does it say about your daughter, my daughter, when she moved away from me?
It says times are different.
There you go.
It's easier
That-
to go places.
That, I think, is the answer.
Hey, how are you? It's nice to see you off. I've seen you on Zoom a few times. How's Mark?
Another question. Can we do sometimes in the summer for the poetry, just a face-to-face get together? I can offer my garden.
You and I.
That's
Are
an
you talking,
option.
are you talking about you and I or the group?
The group.
Yeah, Yeah, well, you know, I've long wanted to bring the group
I
together.
know.
Unfortunately,
I know that there are some people that cannot make it, so Jeff is coming and going, so maybe one of the times that he's here. I mean, it's just fun to get to know people through the screen, but
you know, I think it's a good point. I have sort of put that aspiration aside because,
well, the COVID was COVID first of all,
and there are people who are out of town, not just Jeffrey, Steve and Meg are out of
I
town,
know.
Jill, there's Claire.
listen,
That's why I've put it aside. But you're making the point, whoever can come can come.
I just think it's, you know, it's, I never had that experience to get to know people this way.
This way.
You could have a poetry party.
Yeah,
He's the boss.
no,
I'm gonna be in your office because I'm gonna
Okay.
check on Leo.
no, we can do Poetry Plus. We can do some poetry and socialize. I love the idea.
I think it's,
Let's,
you can political vote next time.
I think everybody would love it. Let's try to do it before the summer's over.
Sounds good.
Come to your place. Where do you live? You lived on Richmond for a while, didn't you?
I moved from Richmond and I'm on Shaker Crest, which is parallel to Richmond, just behind the library,
Which library? Beechwood?
the Richmond Library.
You're on Shaker, just
If
be,
you go on Shaker, past Richmond, after the traffic light, the first street to the right is Shaker Crest.
I know. Oh, I see what you mean. If you're going west on Shaker Boulevard, past the Beechwood Library, it's the first street.
The first street to the right.
Very good. Oh, I love the suggestion. We'll do it.
So, I was home checking the, oh, still on. Oh, but probably off by now. I was home checking the camera, whether the setup was right, I moved it back a little. You said somebody was adjusting the camera.
James was here adjusting it.
Oh, because I was doing it beforehand.
Oh, that's interesting, because I called Jen on my way over and said, I'm going to be seated. Will the camera pick me
Well,
up?
this afternoon I checked.
And it was going to get,
Well, it was, I brought it back a little bit because it had this row. That was the other thing, so I'm home checking the camera, I'm not gonna go see meets and men here. But then you said, there's cake, so I
very good.
but it was sealed, and I don't know what it sold, it said, don't eat.
Oh.
Don't eat.
Oh, very good, very good. Yeah, well, you put something in the refrigerator. Why don't you take a big chunk home for
No.
Jeannie?
Katie doesn't do cake.
She don't need cake.
Let them eat cake, I just didn't want to hide it, so. What was that, Roger?
What's that?
Oh, I was gonna call you. I have made a great discovery last night. I ate at the Bar Louie, and I had a drink, so I wasn't about to drive for a while. So I went into Nervous Dog. I got a coffee, and I looked, I said, what are those? And they said, Russian tea biscuits.
Oh.
I got one, cut it in half. It was very good, so I was gonna get you one and bring it, but I wasn't coming here, so I didn't.
Well, Nervous Dog, very good.
Oh, easier than going down, but it was excellent.
Although the stone oven up here at Eaton,
Eaton is carrying?
they have them. On my way to play tennis the other day, I thought, no, I'm going to stop in there, and I got the last two.
Okay, but again, I was very surprised to see.
Very good. Well, where else did I get tea biscuits that weren't good? So it's like rice pudding. There are great rice puddings in the world.
I happen to be a great admirer of rice pudding.
I am too.
But in my Greek restaurant that I went every day, whether I needed to or not really.
When you lived in?
Baltimore, in Greektown, the hospital was near it. Wonderful Greek restaurant. And he got divorced and married a nice, wonderful woman, but she changed the
recipe?
And it became loose. That's, people sometimes do that, rice pudding that's sort of loose. I liked it very hard.
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
it's like rice pudding. Are you a bread pudding guy?
I didn't grow up with it, I didn't use it much, but when I have, I like it. It's a little heavy. A little heavy.
Well, you know, you remember Fisher's, was Fisher's around, which is out on Sun? They had the world's greatest rice pudding, of course, they closed.
I must say, when I looked at